Look, this talk is going to be quite different to what you have been probably hearing today, because this is all about looking at ensembles and risks and resilience from the viewpoint of the end user, right? Now, I work for the Bureau of Meteorology as the chair, and he said that I'm the general manager for public safety. So it's all about managing risks and building resilient communities. Hi, Misha. Good to see you in the audience. Yeah, and so when you approach a problem like that, it's not only the services that the community receive from the bureau, but it's also the ensembles and the risk element are also a very important dimension in influencing my operating expenses. Right? I have an operating model which is a surge model. It's based on a military concept of where you have your troops everywhere in the front line. But where the battle takes place, you move your artillery and all the heavy equipment to that to deal with the threat, right? So getting a probabilistic view and getting some understanding of risk of that event occurring can have an immediate and direct impact on cost. And these days, fiscally, we're all challenged. We do want to make Australia great again, but putting that to aside. So we really need to be able to harness all that science and information, not only for internal use, but mainly also to interact with our customers and end users as well. So for those visitors who have come from overseas, I just want to whet your appetite on a number of salient features. There was recently, as November last year, the Australian Business Council roundtable commissioned Deloitte and Access Economics, which is one of the top economic agencies in Australia, to get an assessment of natural disasters. And these are some scary numbers that they came up with. Very defensible. They've done all the necessary background work. I urge you, it's available on the web, to go and have a look at this very good report, where it gives the statistics and how some of these have grown over the years. So it's $18.2 billion per annum averaged over the last 10 years from all hazards. And when they model and take into consideration the demographic changes and where people live. And I was told that I was at that forum and I actually asked the researchers, not taking into consideration climate change impacts, it went up to a staggering $40 billion per year. I mean, they're really scary figures. So we need to do something and be much more proactive. And the amount of research work, amount of operational work that we do contribute to all of reducing those costs. But so the investment is really worthwhile in the research and ensemble work and getting an idea of risks and resilience and the vulnerability of communities, because the benefits are huge. Now, if I wear the water security hat, after the millennium drought from 1996 onwards, for 10 years, the government made huge investments again, over many billions of dollars for desalination plants and all structural changes to deal with water security and drought. But it also invested $450 million on a 10-year program, which finished last year. And we to develop, and Rob Vitesi, who spoke yesterday, was the custodian and the initiator of that, the former director of the Bureau, to provide water data, information, and insights. And some of the collaborations that you would hear from some of the Bureau people presenting, including Narendra's team and Dayhawks, is the very strong collaboration that we've had with the CSRO, with QJ and David Robertson, James, and others who have been working there. And that the water security has been such an important element that funding, not to the same quantum, has been made in perpetuity as an annual investment in the Bureau on an ongoing basis to keep the products and services ongoing that we've been developed and make some incremental advancements. So that's the landscape. So Productivity Commission in Australia is an independent agency which reports to the Auditor General and the Parliament. Again, did a review of where the money is spent, and they found that first two dot points summarizes Some of their findings, again, a good report to have a look. It was done in December 2014, so it's 2015. So the propensity to fund response and recovery is a lost cause, because you just keep on, pandering to short political opportunism. And there's cost shifting in a federation where the Commonwealth state, which is in the center, and near independent states, and territories, 7 of them in Australia, there's always shifting, saying it's your problem, and then the centre saying, no, it's your problem, we've given enough money. There's $50 million spent every year just on immediate response, not on full cost rebuilding and all of that infrastructure, but $50 million spent every year, funded equally through the Commonwealth, which is the centre, and the states to support emergencies. And the Productivity Commission said that all these millions and billions of dollars that you spend in recovery and response is not doing a great deal to making sure that the systems and the sustainability that goes into the future. And they proposed a paradigm shift, which is being currently embraced by government, is to increase focus on the planning, mitigation side of, so that's before the event occurs. Do your planning properly. Planning doesn't mean that operational planning only, but also planning means planning where you build houses, do you build on floodplains, what do you do with your wetlands, and all of that as well. Again, I'm not going to talk much about, the one in 100-year flood boundary that you developed after a model, and it is a line on the sand on a map. So, I mean, it is as if people on the left-hand side, are charged different rates of that line, and people on the right-hand side are completely within the flood boundary. The value of the properties are different, but we all know that that's got a confidence interval around it. And it could be as wide as 10 kilometers apart. But here we have a middle of the road, and people on the left and the people on the right are treated differently, even from the insurance perspective. Again, ensembles can pay. I think Keith Bevan was doing some work at an early stage, but I haven't been able to be in touch with him to see how much he's progressed. So there is there is a willingness to invest more in looking at insurance as a method of mitigating and reducing impacts, looking at improving your warnings and forecasts and warnings as well. Insurance, because insurers are managing risks, and ensembles provide a quantitative valuation of risks. So, I'm trying to I'm preaching to the converted here, but I'm coming from the user's perspective, and it's not an abstract concept. It is real. For me, it is real as an operator and a person who manages budgets to be allocated for various activities. So how does institutions respond to risk and resilience? So they're not institutions such as only the Bureau of Meteorology, where we have the responsibilities for the weather, climate, and water. One of the privileged organizations which do all the services. If you go to the UK, the UK Environmental Agency does the floods, and the UK Met Office, the Met Office does the weather forecasting, and the flood forecasting centre at Exeter is an artificial construct for them to get to work together. So in our case, it's a seamless operation because we work for the same organization, and it's easier to get I can see Charlie's smiling over there, so maybe he's pulled out a dagger or something like that to stick it in later on, but that's okay. So looking at institutions who are working as response agencies, they're all subject to financial pressures and high competition for dollars, because there are new demands, demands from refugee communities coming, just like in Europe, somewhat in Australia, and we have to allocate funds that were not allocated before, and there's only one bucket that comes from taxes and the revenue. Yes, countries can grow, but there's potential, there is real competition for dollars. Disaster risk reduction information needs to seamlessly dovetail with decision support systems. If I'm an end user and I'm a dam operator, there's no point in publishing something on a web and saying, here's a magnificent forecast using our short-term ensemble prediction system. You can use it now. And they sort of scratch their head and sort of say, well, how am I going to use this? Is it do I have the time? Do I have during an event to actually do that work? And I'll try to give in 3 case study examples. I'll share with you how that barrier has been somewhat overcome. Need to understand the risks from a person who wants to evacuate a town with a view to aim towards 0 deaths and to mitigate damages to critical infrastructure. They need to understand the concept of risk, because all decisions are based on what risk. Currently, it's a bit depending on the type of threat we have, whether it's a tropical cyclone or whether it's a bushfire, or floods are much better quantified, at least in Australia, through minor moderate levels based on impacts. And there's high public and political scrutiny. If you get it wrong, you're really flogged to death these days. If you get it right, you don't get any praise. You're asked, why couldn't you do better? So it's a no-brainer that we need to enhance our skills on that. So how does the public, so what's the public's view about risk and resilience? I did cover how the institutions look at it. So there, I've given 4 dot points there about the digital revolution and the unprecedented pace of change in technology, and how people are getting more and more used to these products and the information, and valuing basically autonomy to act, which is something that is quite confronting when we normally have evacuations and response to threats as a community, and being choreographed by emergency services or police or agencies wherever you come from. You can just imagine the chaos that will be created if individuals decide when to evacuate and block roads or wait till the last moment. So it's a challenge for us. So personalized, near frequent, they want updates more and more, and more information. And unfortunately, when they're not provided with information from reliable sources, they go into third-party providers who got all no responsibility but all care as long as you pay. And some of the information that's been provided is substandard and can lead to a false sense of security for people who have to be responded to. And that then brings to the last point about increased reluctance to evaluate. I've got all this information at the bureau. I've got Weather Zone or IBM or Google providing me with this information, and I know a lot better than what you're telling me. Probably this cyclone track is going to miss my house. Probably not, but that's the reality. So again, even with the cyclone track, the cone of influence, which is a probabilistic assessment of where a cyclone that's generated over the sea crosses land, is an important, because that then covers and goes over the catchments, dumping copious amounts of rainfall. So understanding the customer, I just want to quickly take you through just a couple of slides just to say that we take this very seriously at the Bureau and gone through a very serious process of an expensive, and we've made quite a big, large investment in public safety to go out there and engage the community. And over 500 customers have been customers, end users, members from the public, focus groups, and all of that has gone through. Copious amounts of data have been collected to determine what is the voice of the customer, and the data has been analyzed and produced in artifacts which are quite alien for me, who's come from an engineering and a hydrology background, because when you go into this digital field, you hear about sprints, you hear about scrums, and I'm not a sprinter again, you're looking at me, I'm definitely not a sprinter. Scrums, it's always with rugby, but well, these guys talk about scrums, sprints, it's an alien world, but they're doing a very good work, because what you can see at the top is, they've plotted the value chain, and they not only look at the value chain as from data to information, insights to actions, but also map who's providing this information and the warnings, and how are these influencing decisions, etc. So when this work is finished by about the end of this year, we'll be very well informed about what are the pains points for not only for the Bureau but for not only for the direct customers, but also the customer's customer. Because our primary customer are the emergency services who actually respond to threats, but the customer's customer, which is the public, or a sectoral, like the agricultural sector, or the mining sector, or down tools if they have big storms and thunderstorm for the mining sector, or whoever. You know, we're getting a very good insight. So I just wanted to impress on you, this is not hearsay that I'm really talking about here. When customers say that they want this now, they want it quickly, they want an assessment of the risk, not only a qualitative but quantitative, you know, those requests are real. And we've got evidence to underpin that view. So what does the voice of the customer tell us to date? You need to be able to understand risks and associate those with the decisions. Because that's important in determining how you mitigate impacts and what options they have. Yeah, qualitative advice is useful, but really need quantitative assessments of risk. So what is the Bureau's response to this voice of the customer? So we've gone down the path of saying, well, we're going to give a commitment. Over the next 5 years, we're going to move the way that we've been providing forecast and warnings to impact-based forecasting. Right? So that's quite a big jump for where the Bureau was. Now, impact-based forecasting is not totally alien to what most of the hydrologists and the water resource people do for flood forecasting, because at least in Australia, we predetermine at certain locations for water levels what are minor, what are moderate, and what are major, and what are catastrophic flood levels. So they are pre-cooked based on the impacts, and then we do the forecasting, and when we reach a point, we say we're coming towards a minor flood. That is really an impact-based forecast, but it is in steps, right? So how good would it be that if you can actually provide in a near real-time basis where it's going to inundate, so that you can actually take mitigative actions as you go along the path for these emergency agencies. I am aware of some of the work that Dasarath is doing in using various intervening technologies about on the run. I think they've done some very good work, which is still probably in a pilot state and applications. Simone in Philippines is an example that I've seen. And probably we're looking towards piloting some of that in the future. But impact-based forecasting is the way we want to. Another example that I could take from completely outside, just to give you a bit of a better understanding of what I mean by impact-based forecasting. And we have what's called thunderstorm asthma in Victoria, here, in Melbourne, during the early parts of summer. So this summer, but the last summer we had some fatalities where people who breathed in the pollen, vulnerable people from asthma, they got very bad. And I think we had about 8 deaths due to this unfortunate event where the pollen particles, which are mobilized by wind during a thunderstorm, get charged, and the particles attract a charge which actually it's like getting blown up into smaller particles which cannot be managed, which cannot be prevented through the nostrils going into your lungs. So people who had asthma got really, really bad, and they had to be almost in intensive care. People who had hay fever, which is normally a reaction, went into deep asthma, and people who didn't had moderate started showing some impacts. How good would it be that if we have a forecasting system that doesn't only tell you that, yes, it is a day that you should be careful, but also say that here are the vulnerable communities, these are the suburbs where you have the communities that are most vulnerable, and here are the hospitals, and can you mobilize the ambulances in these areas rather than have it all spread around all Victoria. And that's the impact-based forecasting from a public health viewpoint. We also decided on a roadmap to incrementally improve the areas where we are partnering with other agencies and doing a warnings framework review, and there are other complementary initiatives. So the Bureau is responding to this in a quite a strong way. What I want to use the next 15 minutes or so is to take you through some examples of how we are currently using Ensembles to give better information to our end users, not to the public, in this case to the end users, And also give you one or two examples where we are working through deterministic and we have a pathway towards ensemble. I'm not going to, this is not about the technical side of ensemble forecasting and how we do this. I think there will be a number of presentations. We've got, at least from the Bureau, we've got DH, we've got Narendra, Fitzum, there are others in the audience who you're welcome to speak with, who will give you the good oil about the deep and, the deep stuff about how you do the forecasting work. But I just want to take you quickly through some of the examples. So here's one on flood forecasting, right? So the emergency services which respond to the warnings and forecasts that we provide have 4 or 5 questions. So when will it reach the peak level? If it's the levee that is going to be overtopped, they just want to get an assessment as to when would it happen. How early can you tell us that it's going to get there? And we have a very rudimentary sort of a way of providing some ensemble work, but we continue to talk during operations with our end users, who's maybe a manager of a levee bank that is protecting a city. And it is real, because the next example is a real example of Lismore, and they would ask the forecaster, because we cannot give a probabilistic estimate of the risk associated with our predictions, because we give one level, 8.3 meters, to be reached by 3:30 p.m. in 3:30 p.m. today. Of course, we do flood watches, flood warnings at various levels, so you're not sort of dumped in the deep end. It's a progressive, but still it is deterministic. We all know that it is not a deterministic. So understanding the risks are important from an operator's point of view, because the decision that they take to evacuate a city of 25,000 is a significant decision, right? And you can just imagine the logistics of that, and the cost to the communities, and the social dislocations, and the anxiety that you build. And if you get it wrong, I said earlier, political, public scrutiny, inquiries, we front up, we have to be speaking to people of, if you overwarn, underwarn, then you are in front of the coroner. I've had my chief flood operator, Jeff Perkins, fronting up to the coroner in Dungog, for those who are in Australia, New South Wales, but there were a few fatalities, nothing to do with the Bureau's forecast. It was an unfortunate incident about an elderly person who didn't really want to leave, but she was disabled, he was disabled, so he drowned. Okay, so Cyclone Debbie, which came across land last March in 2018, was a severe cyclone. It sort of came in, went out to the sea, and came back again and inundated parts of Lismore and overtopped parts of the levee. You can see the red parts are where the rainfall was most severe, and you can see that it's 2 convective systems working here. There's one having rotations around this area, and there's another one down here, 2 bands. And then what it did was it sort of tracked across the land and went out to the sea, and then it came back and inundated this area where there was the town of Lismore. So that now you're in an operating environment, they're trying to work through. The impact of that was, over just over 2 weeks, the impact was that there were record floods in most parts of northern New South Wales, above Goulburn. So many of these towns, with all those copious amounts of intense rainfall being shedding down, you can just imagine what a flood forecast is confronted with, to giving forecasts for each of these locations, towns, and that's what I meant earlier, that we have a surge model of capability, and once I get the information about risk, I can authorize people to travel from other parts of Queensland, so Australia would travel to move there, so I have a cost justification so that I'm confidently sign off on how you can do that work. This is the approach that we currently take. It is a sort of a poor man's sort of a attempt at an ensemble, because we currently have a deterministic path. So we use this the global ECMWF, the deterministic predictions. We use some of access models to give some rainfall forecasts, but they are raw forecasts. They're not neither downscaled or post-processed. Using David Robertson and QJ's developed this rainfall post-processor for Narendra's work, and they're not using any of that. But it gives a bit of a feel for what, there are no probabilities associated with any of these. But it's an ensemble that we don't really have an ensemble. So that's why I said that we have invested and a project that is going to look at this quite. Is there any discussions about that somewhere during this conference about the ensemble work that you're doing for short term, or not quite?
There was a poster session and then.
Okay. So there is a bit of work outside, you can have a look. So that's what we are, and we have to then translate all that information to the public as well. You can call it dumbing down, but it is, you can't really provide that information to the public in the form that we provide a reservoir or a dam operator. But so that's the way that we provide it now. We provide it, ongoing into the future as well, about what the threat levels and where the threat levels were for the various locations in the system. I'm not going to focus too much about the steps work, but I think Carlos, is he here? Carlos, your presentation is later today?
Agat will present today.
Yes, so Carlos and Agat, hi Agat, will be presenting today, so I'm not going to talk about this, but we do have a short-term ensemble predictive system that's been working. We have working to bridge the gap between numerical weather prediction models, which take a bit of time to warm up, and what we call rain fields, which has about 12 hours, up to 12 hours, we do a forecast. So there is this gap, and Alan Seed, who's is a world-renowned scientist in the area of short-term ensemble prediction systems, is doing some work, and two of his, and Agat works in my team in the flood area, and Carlos used to be the regional hydrology manager in Tasmania. We'll be speaking about this, so I don't want to spend more time on that. Let's continue. Oh, I am actually at the moment. So yes, I just clicked, and that's what happens. So let me go through to the next one, probably. It's okay. It's okay. I think. Okay. Right. Okay. So let me give you another example of a very real example where the thirst for risk-based assessment and ensembles are real, and we are again dealing with in Sydney. It's related to the Hawkesbury-Nepean Valley, which is a big valley with a high population density, downstream of a very large dam called the Warragamba Dam, a huge dam, main dam that supplies the city of Sydney, and we've recently been commissioned. So we've had some major risks in that area that the government believes needs to be managed, and they are looking for some answers. And part of that is, integrated with ensembles. And the theme is resilient valley, resilient communities. Now, if you look at that, look at this figure, this is something that gives you goosebumps, because if you have a probable maximum flood, the diagram here actually, the houses here shows that the number of houses that get inundated. So most of the houses are going to get inundated. But what you see here is the black triangle here is the Warragamba Dam, and what we are speaking about here is downstream of the dam, and the threat to the communities there, and the damage, if you look at from a dollar viewpoint, is quite heavy. So we've done, there's been some collaborative work that's been done in New South Wales, where they've looked at the residential property impacts and the damages, and you can see that if it is extrapolated with historical floods, they are quite horrendous. If you superimpose the 1867 flood, there will be 12,000 properties impacted, and cost of up to $5 billion. And the evacuation numbers up to 90,000 people to be evacuated, and the lead time that we currently give is about 6 hours, which I will demonstrate to you is hardly sufficient in this time. Our colleagues in New South Wales have done some transport simulation work. I hope it works, because it's just a 1-minute video that shows because the first thrust towards evacuating people was to see whether they spend money on improving the road network because it's expensive. A kilometer of road can cost you up to 25, 30 million or even more dollars but they still, I think, went ahead and did some road works before. And 5 years down the track, they found that the problem is now same because the development has caught up with the road capacity and the choking points are still there. So what they did was they did a simulation. What you see on the right-hand side of this, you'll see the dam. There's only 3 points. This is a quick video, but it's nice to show that. The green vehicles are the ones that actually got to safety. The red ones are the ones that trapped, that couldn't get out and would be at risk. And the yellow stickers are when roads get. So what they did was they did some transport simulations integrated with some hydrological inundation work. No, it's not being shown, is it? It's no. Perhaps we'll skip it if it's not working. Probably go to the start again. So working. So this is about road transport. So you can see the green on the right-hand side. There is the Warragamba Dam, and you can see the flood propagating down. So this is under the normal kind of warnings that we currently give, and you can see how some of them are evacuated, but roads are getting progressively blocked, and you'll see the end result is quite catastrophic. 11,000 persons were trapped because they just couldn't get safely out. The next couple of shots are more granular, look at some of the more problematic areas, and you'll see that there are certain numbers that are still cannot sort of get across. There are traffic jams, and you can just imagine. This is an orderly, by the way, this is an orderly evacuation, not a haphazard. You can just imagine if it was haphazard. So this was the planned evacuation simulation with enough lead time. Right? Currently we provide 6. They wanted 12 to 36 hours to evacuate, and we did another sort of a very rough simulation to see what that would provide. And before this, they've been doing some road works. So 84,000 persons evacuated and 0 persons trapped. So the message for us through that. How do I get out of here? Just close the window. Okay. Yeah, so that's the message for us. So before they commissioned the Bureau about giving us a contract, this took a little while, more than a year to do this work as a warm-up work, is to provide the Bureau with quite a substantial, they invested in the Bureau quite well in order to look at that. So I said for a place like Penrith, it needs 8 hours to get to, more than 8 hours lead time, and North Richmond, and so on. So the thrust of all of this is they want 36 hours and an ensemble prediction with probabilities associated with it so that they could orderly evacuate. I'm just trying to impress on you. And then when you looked at the roadmap for all of this work and the project components, you'll see here, down here, is that we are working closely with Beth Ebert and her team on the numerical weather prediction areas. I did see Beth yesterday, but I'm not sure whether she's here. She's here today. Oh, there she is. Doing some work there, and then we've got to do the hydrological ensemble work, and we'll combine these and look at the uncertainties and provide that work. We've got about 2 years to do that work and be ready and demonstrate to our clients that this is a complementary way of looking at how you operate the dam. Now, when you have a dam, that is contributing to the floods as well as the downstream flows. The more lead time that we give and optimize the airspace in the dam can have a big impact because it can harvest more water and not keep a bigger volume available to fill flood flows. So so all of that work was done to justify the investment in the ensemble work. Again, from an end user point of view, they do found value in investing in the ensemble work at the Bureau, as well as raising the height of the dam, because they felt that when you combine the two, they were going to deliver some real goal. How am I doing with time? Can I have 5 more minutes?
Certainly.
Okay. So just a couple of examples. Probably I'm stealing Narendra and his team's thunder, but I will still explain quickly, again, not the science, but how the end users were impressed with the work that we've done, and they've taken on board some of the new 7-day forecasts and the seasonal forecasts. So again, here, we use the numerical weather prediction models, our suite of models coming out of Access. And then we, Phil Riley gave this slide a little while ago. We combine all of the other forecasts that we have from the Met Office, so ECMWF and others, to provide various rainfall ensembles for various purposes that we put our rainfall forecasts, including the seasonal climate outlooks. But that's the crux of the matter. Is over the last maybe 7-8 years, David Robertson's been a part of this, QJ has been part of this. We've developed an operational 7-day flow forecasting system. And currently we have over 168 sites and for the public, and 209 sites for registered users. The registered users are the ones are mostly our end users who use this information in a very responsible way. So we give them an hourly flow hydrograph, whereas the public, we only give a daily average flow, because we don't want them to be confused that this is a flood forecast that we are really giving and start acting on it. Although it can give you flood intelligence 7 days in front. So if you look at the flood continuum of seamless forecasting, we have a 7-day forecast that is updated daily, which gives a flood intelligence signal. Then we have the flood watch 3 days before an event. And then we go into flood warnings, which goes to minor, moderate, major, and if it's really catastrophic, it would go into the catastrophic level. We have worked very closely with customers from the Goulburn Broken Catchment, a water management agency, the Catchment Management Authority, the CMA, and they've looked at using these, although they are deterministic 7-day flows, to properly plan the environmental, manage the environmental risks. They have water in storage, meet ecological flows downstream to maintain ecological health. Again, it's a matter of, if you use the water once and use it when there's going to be natural flows, then you've actually wasted your water that is in storage. So they've used even the deterministic work that we do with the 7-day forecast, but we have a plan to move that into ensembles, and that will give them a much better appreciation of what the risks are. And this is a delighted customer, just only from the deterministic work, saying, thank you for the work that we've done. But holding their hand and running a case study has been the critical circuit breaker for us, because then they know how to adapt and what to use. Quickly go through the seasonal forecast and give you, again, just a quick example. We have, again, a seasonal forecasting system, the service, that is updated monthly. 3 months, and we'll be very soon moving by about June to monthly flows as well, using dynamic and statistical models. And the work that was done using Bayesian statistics to do the statistical model has been great. And that's been one of the pioneering pieces of work that we've had, and the first set of products from the $450 million investment in the whole of the Bureau, not on the water forecasting initiative only, but put out to the public. And here there's an example of again the use of the ensembles from an agency which is making decisions about water allocations. The cone of influence, you can see the light blue, the bands are based on climatological data. But the work that we've done to give a probabilistic forecast in the seasonal sphere into the next 3 months is the the orangish triangles and the confidence intervals around it, is a much narrower operating area, so that the operator can work with a lot more confidence. And this is a product that's out there for the end user now. The Bureau's work been translated in partnership with the Department of Primary Industries and Water to actually provide some forecast to the public, not to the public, to the irrigators about how much of water. And you can see the uncertainty that they're now working with is much narrower, given that So that sort of brings me to the end. And in summary, understanding the risks of natural hazards is really critical to building resilient communities. And I can't impress on more that the risk can, if you want to build resilient not only communities but also industry, as well as protecting critical infrastructure, we need to get a quantitative assessment of risks of natural disaster threats. Many decision support systems dealing with water, the hydrological ensembles, they will gleefully embrace it, but there is a big barrier to overcome. And looking at from institutional challenges about adoption of this scientific advancement, the biggest challenge is how do you get them to adopt this when the level of knowledge, there are few representatives from agencies around here, but not many, right? So how are they going to use the work that we do? So the way that we at the Bureau have approached this is to develop case studies, holding their hands, but collaborative work. We've done with Melbourne Water cases here, that we've done some water with Melbourne Water. We've done some water work with other agencies as well, and we've ensured that we have an exemplar that can be used by others in the decision-making process. So collaborative case studies are a circuit breaker, and we've definitely found that to be true. Public challenges, there are many public challenges. It's all about communicating risks, and I do understand that there's a social science dimension to it, and avoiding misuse. People look at the deterministic flow level that's given on a flood forecast and assume that it's going to be right. That's the number that they target, and we get letters from politicians and why didn't you get it right? And because we are unable to give a confidence interval around it at the moment, but we are moving towards that. So user-centric design is something that we've adopted as a practice. The deep involvement and deep engagement with our customers, and as that map showed, we will be much better informed about how ensembles and the risks are used by the public and how they would put into practice, so that we know that when we provide the products and services out there, that it will have an impact. So that the impact-based forecasting dream that we have had will be realized one day, not too far into the future. Thank you.
Thanks for a great talk. I think even though we're a little behind our original schedule, I'd love to have people have a chance for one or two quick questions. And then hopefully we'll do a very orderly evacuation out to the finish spot. No one trapped.
Simone?
Yeah, great talk, very inspiring. You touched on it a little bit in the end, but what's your experience with how people, the public, then mainly, can deal with uncertainty? If you can provide the information, how can they use it to make their decision?
Well, I think that's a piece of work that we're doing at the moment. I have no definitive answers, because currently we need to see how the probabilistic information can be translated into something that is. We haven't done any user testing of possible products. It's a bit early. That's why I said this work will get finished by the middle or towards the end of the. We've done the discovery phase at the moment. But so we've got the discovery. The education levels are varied. The demographics are different. People absorb information differently. Some like data, some like visuals. So we are working with them. Currently, there are a lot of binary information, like will it rain or not rain in the next 5 hours kind of thing. They can understand that. But the misuse is the scary part for us, because when a tropical cyclone is approaching land, say in Queensland. So 2 days in advance, the cyclone track intersection is got a high degree of uncertainty. So the median may be, plus or minus 50 kilometers on either side, which has got a cone of influence of 100 kilometers. But people tend to wait, hoping that I'm probably not going to be in the track. And then they have this sort of a, if you mind my language, an oh shit moment, I should have probably left. And then there's not a lot you can do. So it's interesting, that area. There's a lot of people working on that at the moment, including University of Queensland, the Risk Frontiers, and a number of other agencies. Yes?
Just a follow-up. Are you working with media to communicate better those uncertainty to the public? Because a lot of forecasts, or the media has got a lot of influence in what people do. That's something you're thinking about?
Definitely, media is an important part. There is a slight risk element of the media. When you talk about media, we are providing information at this stage to response agencies, and the response agencies take the bureau's forecast as one major element. Maybe 70% of their decisions are based on what we advise them, but there is 30% of where is the competing demand. So if we go directly to the media, we have to be in sync with what needs to be done by other agencies. So a collaborative, cohesive media approach is necessary. What we've done in order to smoothen that path is to embed a severe weather forecaster in the regional operating center, the disaster, for dealing with the disaster, so that everything is choreographed as much as possible. There are challenges to talk to. I mean, there are people out there putting probabilistic forecasts, but when it's good, they jump up and say, look, we get hardly any money, we do a lot better than the Bureau, but most of the time they give wrong and they're invisible. So, all care, no responsibility. Charlie?
Thank you, really nice presentation, Jaya. I'm quite interested in, you talked about the example of case studies and sort of holding the hands of customers, which with a different angle from some of the conversations yesterday around, perhaps around low fast and e-fast, sort of, putting information out there. And I can understand both aspects. I guess once you have held the hand of somebody and you've demonstrated, what are your next steps then? Do you have a strategy as to how you would roll that out? And we're, of course, in this landscape of more and more information, the ensembles, there's so much more information to bring in. So I'm just interested in how you go from that initial case study, holding somebody's hand, to developing new services from that.
Yeah, so we have a strategy to wean out of that. I mean, we cannot afford. If there's 10 dam operators can come and say, can we do 10 case studies? We'll say yes, but you're going to do 10 different case studies, and there'll be a structured way of looking at each of the case studies and response and the decision making that will be voluntarily shared among the community of practice. So that's the kind of the philosophy that I've followed and promoted, so that we can't really get entangled and provide a superior service to one customer who's just put up their hand with the best, first in, best dressed kind of thing, and saying that let's work together. But I'm well aware of GFAS and GLOFAS, and their intent is quite different. Their target audience is quite different. I mean, GLOFAS is all about giving, I think, signals to major UN and other agencies about there is going to be a problem in this part of the world that you guys need to start thinking about, kind of signal. The EFAS is about giving a 3-day threat advance notice to European countries so that they can mobilize their own work to do the more granular work. Here it's about the end user who's responsible for allocating water to the irrigators making better decisions. And once they see the value of the work that we have done, and together, they just embrace it and run with it. The previous way of looking at the forecast into the future and giving the water allocation is that at the beginning of the irrigation season, they say that with this year our storages are quite full, we think it's going to be quite wet, you can get 100% of what water that you are meant to get. Very often that's not the case, So what they then do is do the worst case scenario modeling work and say that in the history of our record, what was the near worst case scenario. I mean, not everybody. Some water authorities do that, and they take a very conservative attitude and say that, look, your water allocation based on the current scenarios that we think maybe 50%, but look, in next month, with more information, we will probably increase it if we have a bit of rain or get a better forecast. So some of them are now moving away from that with the extra information that they've got. So collectively, I think we are progressing on a trajectory that should be much more efficient and much more economically beneficial to the end user. Yes?
How far do you think a borough can move in the direction of impact-based reporting? So you had this example of health, different people react differently to health, and you could of course take this further and start modelling with people, start modelling their physiology and so forth.
Yep.
It becomes quite quickly a very, very broad field.
So
where do you see your role end and somebody else's role?
Yeah, I think I had partnerships somewhere, but I can't remember exactly. Collaborate in a collaborative case study. I think somewhere I did say that it's got to be a collaborative piece of work. We have a mandate from government as to what exactly we are funded to do, and we will work with the health departments. And in the case of heat stroke or thunderstorm asthma or any other related activities, currently we do work with the bushfire agencies about where the smoke's going to go, etc. So it's going to be a partnered approach. And we don't hold all the data either. The Australian Bureau of Statistics hold data. There's a lot of information on demographics that are held by Geoscience Australia. So for example, on the tsunami work, we work very closely together. We have the Indian Ocean Joint Tsunami Operating Center is a joint effort between the Bureau, the Geoscience Australia, as well as the State Emergency